Welcome to Life Stories. Sometimes, life takes us on unexpected journeys, leading us to places we never imagined. Emma Carter never thought she would inherit a crumbling old house in the Blue Ridge Mountains. Nor did she expect it to become her only refuge. What started as a desperate escape soon turned into a story of redemption, love, and secrets hidden within its walls. From betrayal to new beginnings. This is a tale of resilience and second chances. Subscribe to Life Stories to begin today's journey. And let's uncover Emma's incredible story together. Emma Carter sat stiffly in the leather chair, her fingers nervously twisting the strap of her second-hand purse. The law office was pristine, its walls lined with mahogany shelves filled with books she doubted anyone actually read. The air smelled of polished wood and expensive cologne. A sharp contrast to the world she knew. She barely processed the words of the man sitting across from her. His voice calm yet firm. "Your grandfather, Mr. Walter Preston, has left you his entire estate," Mr. Thompson repeated, as if she hadn't heard him the first time. He shuffled a few papers before continuing. "The property is located near the Blue Ridge Mountains." Emma's lips parted slightly, her thoughts slipping into a distant haze. Walter Preston, her father's father, a man she had only seen in fading childhood memories. A quiet man with paint-stained hands who always seemed to be looking at something just beyond the horizon. As if the world held secrets only he could see. "I barely knew him," she murmured. More to herself than to the lawyer. The truth of it stung. She had spent years meaning to reach out. To visit. To ask about the man no one in her family ever spoke about. But life, as it always did, had gotten in the way. A bitter divorce between her parents had turned him into a distant figure. One that neither side had encouraged her to know. Mr. Thompson adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses. "Were you aware that your grandfather was an artist?" Emma nodded slightly. "I knew. But we weren't close." She swallowed the lump in her throat. "After my parents split, I guess I just assumed he didn't want anything to do with me. He made a modest living selling his paintings. Nothing extraordinary in terms of fame. But he was respected among collectors," Mr. Thompson said, his voice softening. Emma felt tears prick her eyes. She should have visited him. She had always meant to. But never did. She wiped at her eyes quickly, embarrassed by the sudden emotion. "I didn't even know where he lived." Mr. Thompson hesitated before speaking again. "Miss Carter, whatever your relationship was or wasn't, your grandfather made it clear in his will. He wanted you to have everything." Emma's throat tightened. "Everything?" "There's a house," he said, sliding a photograph across the polished desk. "It's quite remote. Near the Blue Ridge Mountains. It has been in your family for generations." Emma picked up the photo with trembling fingers. The house was old, with a wraparound porch and faded white paint peeling in long strips from the siding. The shutters hung at odd angles, weather-beaten from years of neglect. It looked abandoned, forgotten, like a relic of a lifelong past. "I don't understand," she whispered. "Why me? Why not someone else?" "There is no one else," Mr. Thompson said simply, gathering the papers into a neat stack. "You are the only heir." Emma's heart pounded as she clutched the folder of inheritance papers. The weight of it pressed against her chest like a burden she didn't know how to carry. Stepping out of the office, the crisp spring air of New York wrapped around her like a silent reminder of how quickly life could change. As she walked down the busy street, thoughts swirled in her mind. The estate meant nothing to her. A house full of things that belonged to a man she barely knew. But beneath the unease, there was something else, curiosity. A part of her wanted to know what kind of life he had lived. What secrets those walls might hold. She had no idea that this house, this forgotten place in the mountains, would soon become her only refuge. Nor did she know that behind its broken shutters and dust-covered floors, something waited for her. Something that would change everything she thought she knew about her past, her family, and herself. Clutching the folder tighter, She whispered into the wind. "Thank you, Grandpa Walter. I just wish I had known you better." The road stretched endlessly before her, winding through thick forests and rolling hills as the taxi rattled over gravel. Emma Carter stared out the window, the weight of uncertainty settling in her chest like a stone. She had spent the past few days going back and forth in her mind, wondering if coming here was the right decision. But in the end, there had been nowhere else to go. The moment she lost her job at the boutique, it had become clear that her carefully constructed life was crumbling. Ryan had made sure of that. She still remembered his voice, cold and detached, when she told him she was pregnant. "You've got to be kidding me," he had scoffed, eyes narrowing in disgust. "That's not happening." When she had protested, hoping for even a flicker of warmth from the man she had loved, he had only sneered. "Handle it, Emma. Or handle yourself out of my apartment." And so she had. 2 days later, she was in a dingy rented room on the outskirts of the city, barely scraping by with a cleaning job that paid in cash, when her supervisor handed her a mop and said, "You're lucky we don't ask too many questions here." She had simply nodded. There had been nothing left to say. Now, as the car jolted over another pothole, the taxi driver shot her a wary glance in the rearview mirror. "You sure this is where you want to go, miss? Ain't much out this way." Emma gripped the folder in her lap, knuckles white. "Yeah," she murmured, though she wasn't sure she believed it. The road narrowed as they neared the property, the forest pressing in on either side. The last stretch of gravel was barely more than a dirt path. When the house finally came into view, Emma felt her stomach sink. The photograph had not done it justice. The once grand farmhouse loomed before her, its wraparound porch sagging dangerously. The paint, what little remained, clung to the walls in peeling strips. Windows were boarded up haphazardly, some shattered completely. The air smelled of damp wood and neglect. The taxi came to a jerky stop, the driver shifting uneasily. "This is it," he said gruffly. "End of the line." Emma hesitated before stepping out, the crisp mountain air biting through her thin jacket. As the taxi's taillights disappeared around a bend, a shiver ran down her spine. She was truly alone. Or so she thought. "You lost, dear." The voice startled her, and she spun to see an elderly woman standing on the porch of a nearby house, wrapped in a thick cardigan. Her face was lined with age but kind, her sharp eyes studying Emma with curiosity. "I'm looking for the Preston house," Emma said, clearing her throat. "I'm Walter's granddaughter." The woman's expression softened. "Old Walter's girl," she murmured, nodding. "It's just up ahead. That big white place, though I use the term white loosely these days." Emma managed a small smile before turning back toward the house. The key stuck in the lock, requiring several forceful jiggles before the door creaked open. She had expected dust, maybe a few broken floorboards. She had not expected destruction. Vandals had clearly made themselves at home. The floor was littered with debris, splintered wood, shattered glass, discarded beer bottles. Graffiti scrawled across the walls in angry streaks of red and black. In what must have once been a sitting room, furniture lay overturned, its stuffing spilling onto the floor like battlefield casualties. "God, Grandpa," Emma whispered, stepping carefully over the wreckage. "What happened here?" The neighbor had followed her inside, shaking her head. "It's been rough since Walter passed. We tried to keep an eye on things, but empty houses attract trouble." Emma's stomach twisted. This was more than neglect. This was destruction, deliberate and cruel. She wandered into what must have been the kitchen, its cabinets hanging from broken hinges, drawers yanked out and dumped across the floor. A noise from upstairs made her freeze. "Just the old place settling," the neighbor said, though Emma wasn't convinced. Her grandfather had lived here, worked here, painted here, and now, this was all that remained. "Did he spend much time alone?" she asked, glancing up at the highest windows. "He spent most of his time painting in the attic," the neighbor said. Shame what they did to it. Emma looked around at the ruins of what was once a home. Despite the wreckage, she could feel something beneath the surface. The bones of something beautiful. A history waiting to be uncovered. A chance. Maybe. To rebuild. The woman studied her closely. You planning to sell? Emma's hand drifted to her belly. I honestly don't know. Standing there, surrounded by the wreckage of her grandfather's life, she had never felt more lost. But for the first time in months, something stirred inside her. A flicker of determination. Maybe. Just maybe. This house wasn't the only thing that could be salvaged. Emma had spent the night wrapped in a blanket on the floor, the house creaking and groaning around her like an old man muttering in his sleep. The cold seeped into her bones, and every little sound made her flinch. More than once, she questioned whether staying here was a mistake. But in the quiet, as the first morning light filtered through the broken shutters, she made a decision: she would try. There was no other choice. By mid-morning, she had cleared a space in the kitchen, pushing aside broken cabinet doors and shattered plates, trying to make sense of what had been left behind. Her grandfather's belongings were scattered like relics of a life long forgotten. But she was determined to uncover whatever was still salvageable. A knock at the door made her jump. For a moment, she considered ignoring it. No one knew she was here, no one except the kind neighbor from yesterday. But the knocking came again. More insistent this time. Taking a breath, she pulled the door open just enough to peer outside. A man stood on the porch. Tall, lean, dressed in work clothes that had seen better days. He had the look of someone who had spent more time outside than in. His skin tanned. His dark hair tousled from the wind. There was something steady about the way he held himself. Something that made Emma grip the door a little tighter. Can I help you? She asked cautiously. The man smiled. Easy but not too familiar. Actually, I was hoping to help you, he said. Name's Luke Dawson. I'm looking for work. And I couldn't help but notice this place could use some attention. Emma studied him warily. How do you know I need help? Luke gestured at the sagging porch. The peeling paint. The broken window to his left. Call it a hunch. She almost laughed. Almost. I can't pay much. Actually, I can barely pay at all right now. Luke shrugged. We can figure something out later. Right now, you look like you could use a hand getting settled. Emma hesitated. She had learned the hard way that trust was not something to give freely. But there was something about him, something that made her want to believe. Just for a moment. That not everyone had an angle. Against her better judgment, she stepped back, opening the door wider. All right, she said. Come in. Luke took in the state of the house without commenting, his sharp eyes assessing the damage. First things first, he said. Let's get some heat in here. An hour later, they were sitting on the front porch, sharing sandwiches Luke had brought from town. The food was simple, but Emma hadn't realized how hungry she was until she took the first bite. So, Luke said, leaning back against the railing, what's your plan for this place? Emma exhaled, watching the trees sway in the breeze. I don't know yet, she admitted. Sell it. Maybe. Fix it up if I can. I just need somewhere to start over. Luke nodded, as if he understood exactly what she meant. Starting over's not a bad thing, he said. Sometimes it's the only thing. There was something in his voice, something weighted with experience. Emma glanced at him, wondering what his story was. But she didn't ask. Not yet. What Emma didn't know was that Luke Dawson had his own reasons for being here. Hidden deep in his pocket was a crumpled note with detailed instructions about an icon, a valuable religious painting that Walter Preston had supposedly hidden somewhere in the house. And the men who had sent Luke to find it weren't the kind of people who liked to be kept waiting. The morning sun cast golden light over the newly rebuilt house, its fresh paint gleaming against the crisp autumn sky. Where there had once been ruins, now stood a home, a testament to resilience, to second chances, to the unexpected turns life could take. Emma stood on the porch. Her newborn twins nestled in her arms, their soft breaths warm against her skin. Behind her, Luke leaned against the doorway, watching her with quiet admiration. So much had changed in the past year. The house had been restored. But more importantly, so had they. The stolen icon, hidden for so long, had finally been returned to the church, fulfilling Walter Preston's last act of defiance against those who had sought to profit from history. Dean had disappeared, slipping into the shadows where he belonged. And with him, the last remnants of the life Emma had left behind. But the greatest surprise of all had been Luke's true identity. The lost son of a wealthy New York family, switched at birth, his past a story more improbable than fiction. Yet, even after discovering the truth, he had chosen to stay here, with Emma, in the home they had built together. As the wind rustled through the trees, Emma looked out at the land that had once felt so unfamiliar. Now a part of her, she had come here broken, uncertain, afraid. But in this place, in the arms of the man who had stood by her side through it all, she had found something she never expected. A family, a future, a home. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to Life Stories for more incredible tales of love, redemption, and second chances.